I don't know, maybe not even a month and a half ago, and was very concerned and worried about being bitten by a tick. So I think that the best thing that we could do to start out is, I have some questions here, and I'd like to share or have you share as much as you possibly can. We're going to keep this call to about an hour if we can tonight. There is a pretty nasty storm coming in, so if you hear any thunder boomers, forgive me, but it's really pretty awesome sitting out here on the lanai right now. So, Stephen, when did you actually get Lyme disease? Do you know?
Well, when I was 15 years old, this is in 1974, our family usually each year during the summer went to Cape Cod for a week or two for vacation. And we had just returned from our regular vacation on the Cape, and it was probably about end of June, beginning of July. It was hot. And I was working in the garden with my parents and my brothers. We were all out there weeding the garden. It was hot. And I stood up, and everything turned silvery. I was not right in the head. And at first I thought, well, it's just the heat. But I decided I would sit down and get a drink of water, and my parents agreed. They said, go ahead. And I walked down the path of the garden, and everything was turning silver, just this surreal kind of background. And underneath the maple tree by the garden, I saw a glowing ball of light that was about the size of a beach ball, perhaps a little larger, maybe 3 feet in diameter. And all of the colors of the rainbow were shimmering and shining, changing and undulating in it. And I pointed it out. I said, look. It was like being in the presence of some type of superior intelligence. It was otherworldly. It was, and at first, with my background, I thought, this is God. This is God. And then it occurred to me after a few seconds of observing this seemingly intelligent, sentient being that, well, perhaps it was a messenger from God. It was an angel. And at that time, it started floating across the driveway and up over the roof of the house. And as my eyes followed it, it was so overwhelming, I fell back in a grand mal seizure and passed out. So I was so overwhelmed by the sensation of encountering this phenomena that I woke up on the ground and the dog was looking right in my face. So now upon that happening, of course, the day after, I ended up going to the hospital, and they tested me, and they came up with a diagnosis of epilepsy. So I had these kind of slight trigger events in my mind where just like a camera shutter going off, just periodically and randomly, like these little brain zaps, little jolts. And so this was their diagnosis, and they put me on a huge bottle of pills that looked like the Tower of Babel sitting in the middle of the kitchen table. Three of those a day. It was Dilantin, and I've never seen such a gigantic bottle of pills. Well, that was the beginning of my journey, and I could easily wrap it up and say, well, just refer to the story of Job, and there you'd have it. But I will, for the sake of brevity, I will go over the history of this, because I think the misdiagnoses that I've had over the years are a telltale sign of Lyme and what many people go through when it's undetected. So it started off, I was just a teenager, 15 years old. I had to postpone getting my license at 16 years old for another year. I had to go 2 years without having another seizure, and I did not. I took the Dilantin, and the doctors were, well, it could be that it will resolve on its own. It'll never happen again. And it never did. However, I went out on through my later teenage years, went to college, early adult life, got married, got a job, had children, and at about 28 years old, I was having some difficulty with depression, and this was my second misdiagnosis. Now, it had been, 15, so about 12, 13 years that I basically just lived with the little trigger events going on in the mind. But having issues with depression wasn't uncommon, and I was under a lot of pressure, and, things just, it was not that abnormal. So I did take some medication then. I can't remember. I think it was Librax, a combination of Librium and some anti-anxiety med. But I discontinued that for a couple of years. We moved to New Hampshire, and at that time I was also under a lot of pressure due to the move. So this is several years later, again, coming back on the depression medication. Now, I was able to basically overcome that for another 6 or 7 years until it returned again in the 90s. This time we were in the middle of a move, and there was a lot of pressure, and again, this time it was diagnosed as manic depression. And I took Surazone for 7 years, very successfully. It did a great job suppressing the symptoms, and I had probably the most productive years of my life in terms of career advancement, being a father, playing in a band. I was very involved and effective. Now, so we're coming up now on the late 1990s, and as I became more successful, there was more pressure, and the demands of the medication to suppress the depression were increased. So I was prescribed additional medication, and this continued to suppress the symptoms until in the early 2000s I was succumbing to this chronic anxiety that was just overpowering. I would have these panic attacks that I could not suppress with the antidepressants. And the effort to suppress this was not working anymore. I went back. I was diagnosed this time with chronic anxiety disorder.
Wow.
So now...
So this is 4 times that you've been misdiagnosed already.
Right, yes. And a lot of it was psychiatric in the beginning. Of course, the epilepsy being a kind of a neurodegenerative thing way back was the first indicator.
Right.
But now with the chronic anxiety, I was taking lorazepam, and this did wonders for that, again, suppressing the symptoms. And I'll say now that no one along this journey, as far as any of the doctors, ever tried to really find out what was wrong with me. I came back to them with the symptoms. They just gave me the medication to bat it back down, and that was it. That was the game we were in. Now, the anxiety was being controlled, but it was getting worse, requiring greater doses and higher doses. Finally, clonazepam, and increasing the dose, increasing the number of other antidepressants, and I started developing a condition of ADD or ADHD, kind of like an adult anxiety. Well, I had the anxiety disorder, but the inability to focus and to stay focused.
Right.
This was becoming an issue. So I was prescribed. Let me see, what was that? It wasn't Ritalin. It was one of the other amphetamines. And
they're all just. I have no clue. So, but I'm.
Yeah.
Again, it's just it doesn't heal what's going on. It just masks the symptoms again.
Yes, that's
correct.
Right. And that's still the name of the game, and they did their best with marvelous substances to suppress the symptoms. But it came to a point where I was on like 7 or 8 different a cocktail of pharmaceuticals that were no longer working, and it was almost like they
you're lucky that you're alive, probably.
Well, they couldn't create enough to keep me going at that point, and I was failing in my career, my job. Everything was suffering from it.